Hello, and welcome to Technically Speaking. Today we're going to talk about cleaning a carburetor with an ultrasonic cleaner on a vintage motorcycle. So first, let's get the carburetor off the bike and let's take it apart. So here's the removed carburetor. It's time to take it apart and clean it up. Okay, here's the carburetor. We're ready to take it apart. First I want to show you some things about this carburetor. I took out the slide that goes in here. It's still on the bike. I will take that off and clean it in a minute. This is the choke. This is the fuel inlet. This is the idle adjustment. And this is the mixture screw. Down here you have the float drain. And you have the overflow lines for the float bowl and actually they're both, this is the overflow and this is the drain line. First thing I'm going to do is take the carburetor apart. So I'm going to get the right bit on here. So I'm going to use a Phillips head to take off the float bowl. There's 4 screws. And whenever disassembling a carburetor or any other component, it's best to keep your parts organized. Okay, so there's the float bowl. It actually looks fairly clean. I'll set that aside. And here is the float itself. And there's the needle jet. So this is in this case, this is the connection to the main jet. And this is where I said on the other side there was a needle that comes down through and meters the fuel. So next I'm going to take a small bit and push out this, take the float off, take the float needle off. So now we've got that apart. Now I can go ahead and take off the idle adjustment. And it's usually a good idea to turn it in and then measure the turns that you would come back out so that you can put it in the same spot, but the idle adjustment is pretty easy to set. So I will do that here. I'm going to see how far I can turn it in. So it's 1 turn, 2 turns, 3 turns, 3 1/4 turns. It's actually pretty far out, so I think it's probably not the correct adjustment anyway. Usually it's around 2 turns. So as I said, that's the air screw. There should be a little spring in there with it. Now let's take off the choke. It's a 12mm. So you can see that. It's just a plunger style choke. And what else we got here? Take that line off. Okay, now I need to take off the tube for the main jet, it looks like the idle jet. I'll need to take it off also. And I should be able to get that with this modified screwdriver that I have. So the idle jet's always the smaller jet. You can see it's not very big. In this case, the main jet, I'm going to need a socket. In this case, this is an 8mm for this tube. One of the things I like about, there's a little junk in there. One of the things I like about the ultrasonic cleaner is that it doesn't damage O-rings or gaskets or seals. So you're able to do a carb clean in many cases without really changing a lot of the parts. And so that's what I'm hoping for today. I just want to make sure everything's cleaned out and all the crud is gone. So it looks like this is a 10 millimeter. And this is the seat for the float needle. One thing I didn't really point out earlier was that there's usually air tubes on the front of the carburetor. And in this case, this one here provides air source for the air screw for the mixture, the idle mixture. And the one above provides like a muscle pressure for your slide. So it looks like we've got the carburetor completely apart. And the next thing is to get the ultrasonic tester ready to go, and let's clean it. Okay, so now here we have our ultrasonic cleaner that I said earlier it's purchased from Harbor Freight. So we've got it plugged in. First thing we're going to do is add some water. And there's a max and min level, and we're going to take it close to the max. You don't want it to overflow with the parts in it, so you have to make that consideration. And I'm going to go ahead and hit TC, and TC is the heat button, and that will start to heat it up. Then the next thing is to take some of this ultrasonic cleaning solution, and we're going to put a teaspoon in. That's about a teaspoon. And then we're going to put our parts in. So we've got the main body of the carburetor. We're going to put that in. And you may not be able to get the entire thing in initially. Sometimes you have to do it multiple times, run the machine a few times. So I'm going to put all the little parts pieces in here. I don't have to put the screws or anything that really doesn't need clean, but I will put the jets in there because it's good to have the jets really clean. But everything else looks pretty good. I am going to take this off here and clean the float bowl. And I forgot to take the main jet out here, but I'll do that real quick. So this is actually where the main jet goes. So it's kind of convenient if you have a flat bladed screwdriver, you're able to clean it while you're out riding. Okay, so next you hit set, and I'm going to set it for 480 seconds, and then I'm going to click on. If you look closely here, you can see it start to work, and you can see first thing it's doing is it's taking that detergent and it's starting to mix it up. So I'm going to put the lid on. Let's come back after it's done. Okay, this tool is done doing its job. So now we're going to take the parts out. We're going to inspect them, see if we need to run them through again. Now I'm not looking for this to be perfect on the outside, but what I am looking for is to have all the passages clean. And one way that we're going to ensure this is by using compressed air. So what you do is you get a compressed air source, and you don't want a ton of air pressure, but you essentially take it and blow compressed air through each, taking special precaution to keep stuff from shooting in your eyes. Now, one benefit of washing the carburetor in this water detergent solution is that you're not dealing with carburetor spray, carburetor cleaner, which I've squirted in my eyes way too many times. So I'm going to use this to clean out all these ports. All right, that looks pretty good. Let's get some more parts out. Here's the float bowl. Looks pretty clean. And you didn't see me put this in, but this is the slide that I was referring to. you could pick up the tray to get the rest of the parts out. Now I've got a couple really small parts, so I think that they're going to actually be in the bottom. And that's the idle jet. And one more. Ooh, that's pretty warm. And I think I'm good. Okay, you also want to take each jet and make sure that it's clean. Guess you need to see what I'm doing. Okay, so the next step is going to be to watch me actually reassemble the carburetor. So in general, you want to try to do things in reverse order. So the last thing that I did, I believe, was to take these parts out. The float needle. This is the needle seat, I guess. And then I took out the main orifice tube. And then we've got the idle jet. I'm not sure if I checked it. Looks good. Put that back in there. Okay, so that looks like the primary stuff in there. Now let's go outside. Let's go to the idle adjustment screw. Let's put in the choke assembly. Okay, I wanted to show you this. Inside here, actually right here, inside there's an alignment pin. I don't know if you can see it. And that lines up with this. So when you put this in, if you have it not lining up here, it won't go in and you'll fight with it. So you actually have to have it perfectly aligned before it will actually go in all the way. Like that. And if you look in here, you can see how the needle is actually going through that tube here, which is the main jet. So as that needle pulls out, it actually changes the orifice size in there. If I can get this back out. There we go. Okay, so I think I'm going to go ahead and finish the bowl side of it here. We got the float needle, and these are floats are composite, so they can't leak or get a hole in them. The hinge here for the float is actually held in by the edge of the bowl here. So it looks like I've got everything else in there that goes inside. And so I can go ahead You know what? I can see something wrong right now. this gasket is not in correctly. If you can see right here, this sealing area here should be over here, and this is the this is the choke tube, so this might be part of what some problems I'm experiencing. So let's go ahead and flip that gasket over. It'd be crazy if that was the reason this thing wasn't running right, but it very well could be. Okay, we've got that on correctly, and now we put the float bowl in, and you'll notice that when we're putting it in, this O-ring here is actually seating inside of this tube, and that's what allows the main jet to be over here. The fuel enters the main jet through this hole, goes into here, and comes out this orifice, which is a meter jet, comes through this tube and then into the carburetor. So just put a little bit of lubrication on that O-ring so maybe it'll slide together better. There we go. Now I can put these 4 screws in. Gotta be careful with these not to over torque them, and don't tighten any one until all 4 are started and snug. Most fasteners have a torque specification, but most mechanics learn basic torque and what they should be. But in motorcycles, a lot of these screws aren't really strong, so you got to be careful. So now I'm snugging them up. Okay. So now let's put the main jet in, which is the float bowl. And all that we have left besides the drain is the air screw. So the air screw, you need to make sure you have the spring installed. And then I recorded 3 turns, but I'm going to go ahead and put it 2 turns. So how you do this is you gently start it, and then you want to run it slowly until you bottom out. Okay, I bottomed out now. You pick a reference point on the carburetor for one side of the flat. So in my case here, let's see if I can show you this. I'm going to pick a reference point right here, right on this edge. So then as I turn it out, I can go 1, 2. So that'll work. It's a good basic adjustment. All right, only thing left, guys, is to get these overflow tubes. And I looked when I had it apart how these overflow tubes work. They both are for overflow for the carburetor, for the float bowl, I should say. This one is taken from the top. This one down here is actually just a level adjustment. So when it gets so high, it'll first drain out of this overflow, and then if it keeps flooding it for safety and keep safety for the engine, it will come out of this overflow. All right, guys, the carburetor's back together. Next, let's put it back on. Okay, guys, now we need to take the carburetor and reinstall it on the motorcycle. But first, we need to take the slide for the carburetor and put it back on the throttle cable. There's a variety of components here. You can see I've got a spring, I've got a retainer, and now I need to assemble it here. So you find the throttle cable. Where'd you go? Start putting this stuff back together. The trick here is having to compress this spring so that you can get the throttle cable back through the carburetor slide. I don't know if you noticed, I didn't have to drain any gas out of this bike. It's because my son tends to find the extra gas for his four-wheeler. So I got that on. So now the next thing we need to do is what I discussed earlier. We need to make sure that the alignment pin in the carburetor lines up with this. But it should be pretty easy because you just look in there, get it lined up, and once you get it lined up, it should just slide right in. Alright, so once you get it lined up, just tighten the top. Okay. Now it looks like I'm ready to just mount it back in. Okay, now we're going to put the fuel tank back on. I've got the carburetor installed and I've torqued it down. And I'm going to go get some fuel and we're going to fuel this thing up and we're going to see if it'll run. Well, it looks like I got all the ports clear and it runs pretty well. The choke works very well on start now. Before it didn't work at all. So I'm a little surprised that you're still watching this video, but if you do, you must like it. So go ahead and click like. If you have any comments, go ahead and put them below. If you want to subscribe to the channel, you can see more of my videos as I make them. And if you have any ideas for good videos, email me at questionsfortheshop@gmail.com. See you guys later.